According to a recent study from Aviva, companies and private individuals are more likely to be exposed to different types of cyber attacks than physical theft. Phishing emails, identity theft, and spyware attacks are issues that can happen to anyone nowadays. My name is Jonas Strandell, and this is The Clean Feed, a podcast about how we can make the internet a safer place. Today's guest is the CEO of a company that specializes in strengthening human firewalls to help companies avoid cyber attacks. It is my pleasure to introduce Gustav Berghog, CEO of JungleMap.
Thank you very much. My name is Gustav Berghog. I'm the CEO for JungleMap. JungleMap is a software as a service company focusing on combating one of the sort of most urgent threats in the world currently, and that's sort of the cyber attacks. And around 80 to 90% of all the cyber attacks are due to sort of the human error. So we believe we have a super important role in the cybersecurity space to take care of this.
Right. So just looking at the examples of most common cyber attacks, like on a random company, is it the human factor that we're actually looking at that is the most common?
I would say that it's very clear. You see different reports. Someone saying 75, someone saying up to 90%. But it is us, the humans, who sort of, I would say, is the sort of last line of defense. And it doesn't really matter if you have sort of the updated and latest antivirus program, the best firewalls. If you and I, in the end, still click on that link in that suspicious email, which is sort of letting these vicious cyber attackers into our data systems.
There were reports quite recently about a company in Hong Kong or some Asian company that they transferred millions and millions of dollars unknowingly that they were actually being phished from an email. So we talked a little bit before we started recording about how it becomes more and more apparent that the attacks looks like they're coming from the inside of the organization. It's no longer like the Nigerian prince or something similar. Can you shed some light on that?
I would say that sort of those days when you could, fairly easy recognize a phishing email with sort of, misspelling or strange wording or a wrong name, etc. Those sort of days are, I think, gradually, over. And that's mainly due to generative AI, which is helping the hackers to create these sort of, very targeted phishing emails, knowing that it's to Gustav. I want to send a phishing email and I know where it's working, and sort of they can mass customize these phishing attacks. So sort of instead of using a shotgun, they're using a sniper rifle in order to target the victims.
Yeah. So what are the most common misunderstanding, like how companies should address like this IT security?
I think something we stumble upon quite often is that when we talk to different organizations and companies, that they sort of see cybersecurity as something solely for the IT department. And we believe that's totally wrong, because it's all of us in the organization that has a responsibility to make sure that we are not sort of becoming breached or attacked. Because IT sort of, they can monitor the different systems and making sure that the firewalls are up and running, etc. But in the end, as I mentioned in the beginning, 80% or so is depending on us, the other people in the organization outside the IT department, that we are sort of careful when opening emails, making sure we don't use the same passwords on multiple services, and one of those services sort of those leaks those password details, and then suddenly hackers can get access to other accounts and corporate accounts and log in by using those where you should use the same credentials. So the rest of the organization has as much responsibility for IT security as the IT department.
Right. And when I hear you talk about that, I can't help to think that IT and cyber attacks, there's not like time zone framed, if you will, so they don't just happen when you're at work, when you're checking your emails or answering your phone or letting someone through the door. It's actually when you're at home, like when you're doing whatever it is that you're doing, when you're sharing personal information or something around yourself, that might be clues to something that people can actually learn about you that can be used against you. I mean, talking on like social media and what it is that you do online, like leaving little pieces of like trails, if you will, online.
I mean, the hackers are sort of becoming much more and more sophisticated and organized, and of course they sort of, I mean, we talk about something called social engineering, which basically sort of analyzing the data around the victim, what kind of hobbies, what kind of, you know, family situation, friends, etc., and then use that data to, you know, try to fool someone, or, you know, making sure that they can sort of attack someone more efficient than they could have done without this information. So I would say that it's super crucial to have a clear think about what you share and where, because these data, as you said, can sort of be used by someone who with a sort of very vicious intent.
There's this really brilliant TikTok account, and I can put a link to it in the show notes, where he's being challenged. He's like, someone takes a picture or a selfie, if you will, or records a little video, and they sort of challenge him to like, okay, can you tell me where I am right now? And then he shares in like 45 seconds, like he breaks down exactly where they are, exactly at what car park they're standing, just based on their surroundings. And I think, I mean, that's putting on your tinfoil hat, but it's also a way of like showcasing how vulnerable we are online by sharing images of our kids or something that might be an indicator of passwords and things like that. Would you say that the types of cyber attacks have changed over the years, like just recently or over a longer period of time?
I think we touched upon it briefly earlier in the conversation, where sort of we see it goes from that sort of, you know, maybe it's unorganized, not so sophisticated type of attacks into something much more, I would say. I mean, it's cybercrime is a big business today. I think recent data I looked at was that the total revenue generated within sort of ransomware during 2023 was $1 billion. So this is big business. And I think it seems like these sort of hacker groups are much more run like a company almost, which is sort of, you know, almost mind-blowing when you think about it. Maybe it started off way back. I think I saw some stats also back in 2008. The sort of average cost for an attack for sort of the one being affected was around $700-800, and currently I think we're talking about $700,000 to $800,000 on average cost. Another statistics I've seen also is that the total cost for cybercrime during 2023 was $9.2 trillion. So
it's
huge
a business.
Numbers.
Yeah, it's a business in itself, almost. So going back just a little bit, like you come from a company called Jungle Map. I wanted to just like very high level touch upon like Jungle Map and what you do, because you educate companies or people within those companies on like how to avoid cyber attacks. Can you share a little bit like how do you do that? Like what happens when a company approaches you, and what type of company typically would approach Jungle Map for their help?
We are in a business, just as you said, educating companies and organizations around how to build human firewalls, and these industries called security awareness training, and we are, we'll say, the market leader in the Nordics around this. So our customers are, you know, big listed companies, enterprise customers, down to sort of medium-sized enterprises, down to also, I would say, and that's a trend we see now, that also smaller and smaller companies realize that how can we sort of defend our company in a cost-efficient way, because we cannot, you know, invest the same kind of money as the big listed companies. But we can do some things, and that are, of course, sort of the easy things, making sure that you sort of have always updated, software, etc. So there are sort of no vulnerabilities there. Making sure that we have, educate our teams around having strong and unique passwords, using multi-factor authentication, and of course making sure that you have antivirus programs, etc. So I would say we educate companies in that range, basically, from the largest listed companies down to sort of the smallest companies that starts to realize that we need to train our teams in order to avoid getting hacked. And that's also a trend we see, that with the big companies being able to invest a lot in cybersecurity and defending themselves, the hackers are now sort of, with the possibility to sort of mass produce targeted phishing emails, etc., they're also going down in the segments. So instead of going for sort of the big fishes, they're going for volume.
Right, because it's easier to script something now with the AI and just...
Exactly. Exactly, and that's maybe the bigger ones are sort of much better protected.
Right. So what do you say, like, just speculating, but like an end game for a cyber attack? Like, what is it that you actually think that you can acquire from a company with this cyber attack? Is it information? Is it like ransomware? Can you explain a little bit for listeners? Like, all right, so ransomware or being held ransom, it sounds really dangerous, but what does that even entail for a company?
I mean, often what sort of the end game for many of these, as I said, much more sophisticated and organized hacker groups now is sort of financial gain. So what they do, that they often then it starts with a phishing email, potentially then trying to mimic, let's say, one of the sort of more well-known, Meta or Google, etc., and then an end user which is sort of not alert may believe that, this is an email from, let's say, Microsoft asking me to sort of reset my password.
Right.
They give away their sort of user logins, credentials, and then they don't realize that they're actually giving away these credentials to the hacker. Yeah. The hacker get access to the systems, and or in some way then manage to sort of steal the data and keep the data as a ransom, and then trying to get money from the company.
Yeah, because what I'm thinking is that I'm kind of baffled that someone actually open an executable file that they get from some company or some individual that they never heard of. But I get maybe that what you're saying now is more common, that you're actually taken to a link or a page, as I say, and that in itself looks very much like a Microsoft page or Meta page or whatever it is, and it's just basically to say, hey, you need to update your password, and if you're not paying attention, if you're out and about, maybe you're not in your office, you're running, picking up kids or whatever it is that you're doing, you're not actually paying attention to the URL in that window that you're opening. No. So would you say that is like a common thing that happens because it looks so
I would
real?
say that's a very common way of doing it in terms of phishing. And that's also, if we talk a bit about what we do at Jungle Map in terms of our training, I think first of all, I think it's worth mentioning that we look upon these kind of training not as an event. It's not something you can do once a year. Typical sort of e-learning and typical security awareness training has been by others seen as something you do once a year.
Like a fire drill.
Like a fire drill. Yeah. But this is something you need to have top of mind continuously. And that's why we see this kind of learning as a process. So our training goes out to the end user every second or third week. And we have our own methodology, which we invented back in 2006, actually first in the world to provide this kind of methodology, and it's called nano-learning. Oh, yeah. After that, sort of been copied by others called micro-learning, bite-sized learning, etc. But we have the sort of original, and we're very proud of that. But we see that this is something that end users need to have top of mind all the time. So our training goes out every second, third week, all over the year. And this doesn't stop. When you sort of through a 12-month cycle, you need to start again. And then we provide them with sort of updated training materials. There could be new dilemmas, new vectors. One other trend we've seen here last couple of years is quishing, which is basically utilizing that more and more QR codes are being used in the society, at restaurants, in emails. When you log into a bank, you scan a QR code instead. But how can you be certain that that QR code doesn't take you to a, let's say, one of these phishing pages, etc.? So we train then the organization to be much more sort of, alert on these kind of...
Be more vigilant, if you will.
Exactly.
I mean, one of the more common thing that you can pick up in recent time is that when you go to a restaurant, for instance, there's like a QR code. Like sometimes it's a piece of paper, other times it's a little cube or something that sits on the table. It's just a very lazy way of not having to reprint whatever wine list or whatever it is that you have. But also, there's nothing preventing someone from switching that out because I have no idea what a QR code should look like. It's just a QR code, right?
It's very hard to sort of see if it's valid or not. But I think what we need to understand that the end users needs to be aware of that. Sort of, as part of our methodology, we're also using sort of what we call the star. We call it star rating, but it's sort of basically a way that we want end users to think. It's about let's take the example with the QR code. You go into, let's say that you go into a restaurant then. And there's a QR code on the table, and you click on that, or you scan it with your camera, and that is of course very high likelihood of that it's a valid one. It's in a restaurant and it actually has this logo, but it could have been something some malicious guy or girl who just puts a sticker there, and then it goes to something really bad. But we train then these organizations to sort of work with this star methodology, which basically stop when you see something. Okay, should I act now on impulse or no? I will stop. I have a think, and then the T is for think. Stop. And, think. Could this actually be something? No. Just to have that in mind that it could be something vicious. And then ask if I'm here at the restaurant with a friend. Ask him or her. There's a QR code here. Do you think it's safe? Yeah, maybe high likelihood it is. And then you respond or react. So that's the kind of methodology we also is part of our non-learning methodology, and we want end users to use.
Yeah, and that you can actually transition to applying to. We talked a little bit before we started recording, like your kids or something, like stop for a moment and think like, is this something that I should like act upon or not, or am I safe in doing this? And I'm thinking, because it is our duty to sort of make sure that the next generation, our kids and like are safe, that they understand the pitfalls, if you will, of that can happen online. It's not necessarily these days someone lurking in the background or standing in the shadows or something, like someone nowadays is probably more of a threat on their mobile phones or something like that. So I think it's really good advice. That star advice is it's really, really good advice for anyone, not just necessarily companies, if you will. I wanted to touch upon a little bit something that you talked about previously and something we talked about earlier. It's the social engineering part of these cyber attacks. Like, could you maybe shed some light on like what is a social engineering for those who are not familiar with the term?
I mean, social engineering is about that someone is using and collecting information about you through different sources, in order to sort of use that data in order to become much more sort of, I would say, targeted in their attack attempts.
Right.
So it could be, for instance, that they, analyze what kind of, where in the organization you are, what are your colleagues, who would you likely most be interacting with, etc., in order to then sort of try to fool you, to either do something that benefits the hackers or give away your credentials. Like, if they, for instance, see that, Gustav is very, he has a Facebook account, then of course we would not, and we see he doesn't have an Instagram account. So when they try to do something against me, then of course they would not use reset your password through Meta or Instagram.
Right.
Rather than, so it's about doing that kind of analysis and trying to sort of fool you to do something that sort of they can use.
Yeah.
Give away information about what you do and
Right.
whom you're interacting with.
And today you can go online on places like Crunchbase or anything like that to learn like, oh, this person, like Gustav, he's in a CEO position and he probably works really closely with the CFO of this company, or he's probably in a management team with these. So impersonating that person might be of interest for me.
Yeah.
So I think that should also qualify as sort of social engineering, just building a case, if you will, on someone.
Building a case and using that data to exactly say impersonating and being someone,
Right.
you know, who they used to talk about, or fooling them by doing that.
Would you say that there are any kind of steps that people can take before they even like send you an email, like, okay, we need your help, like we want to talk to you about this for our company? Are there any kind of like things that you would recommend anyone? I mean, aside from like always updating your passwords, like we noticed as we were coming into this recording session, there are construction workers outside of the studio, and they always seem so safe. Like they always have everything made sure that they are safe when they're going on roofs and everything. And it's baffling to me that we don't treat our work the same way when we handle such sensitive information sometimes. So would you say that there are any kind of typical advices that people can use in their everyday to stay safe in the companies?
The example where we talked about sort of, you know, getting those emails and, you know, and these kind of things, you know, of course you should always, if you get an email which you believe, you know, there's something strange here and something, I think always be a bit paranoid. And I think typically then, and especially if there's something, you know, it says urgent or something, these of course also to sort of play on your emotions and creating you a, you know, mental state where you may act more irrational. But I think, you know, try to call. Now they're of course also coming AI generated solutions to sort of, you know, making sure that it's not even safe to call someone else, but then maybe you can, you know, both voice and image. You know, if they were talking about larger financial sort of transactions, etc., that you're being sort of asked to do. But so I think it's also, you know, be a bit paranoid. I think there's an old quote saying only the paranoid survives. And I think that's sort of maybe not to the extreme, but back to the star methodology again. Stop, think, ask, and react.
Maybe we're actually coming to a point where it's actually safer to keep your password on a post-it underneath your keyboard than it used to be.
But I think back to that with passwords, you know, make sure that you have, you know, strong, unique passwords. Use password managers. I do that. Because you know it's hard to come up with unique, strong passwords all the time, keeping track of them.
Right.
And of course, multi-factor authentication also always sort of.
I think those are like the basic things that we can probably give away to everyone that try one password or any similar types of service, and they are very integrated into your browser. So it's not necessarily a big threshold to get over. Just like, oh, I need to log in and I need to open another app to pull the password. They're clearly integrated into the services today, so it makes it really easy to use, right?
Yeah. Oh, I agree completely, and I think that. Maybe when you start using a password manager the first time, maybe you feel, you know, when you're doing something different than you've done in the past. Maybe that's sort of little, but over time you get used to it, and sort of the upside from using them versus sort of risk of not using them is, of course, I think, you know, to great benefit for you and the organization.
One of the things that is a common theme with just about anyone that you talk to, that you're trying to help, and we talked about a little bit before we started recording, is that when I go to my parents, for instance, or something, they're always like, "Oh, we had a nice dinner. Can you help us with the computer, or can you help out?" And I had a conversation with my kids. It's like, I can help you. Well, what's the password to this service? I can't help you unlock this if you. I don't know. How do you not know it? Don't you write it down anywhere? Oh, I don't know. I'm never prompted by a password. so I don't necessarily like need it. So I think like a password manager is crucial for anyone.
Yeah. And I think going back to also, if you sort of broaden the sort of thinking around that our kids nowadays are so digital, they're using iPads and iPhones and from a very early age. And I think that often the case is that we haven't sort of taught them these kind of cyber hygiene things. And that could also be, of course, something quite problematic, that your kids are using all these apps and so on, and that sort of haven't been receiving the sort of, I think, the basics in terms of cyber hygiene.
Right.
And that could sort of create also problems over time. So actually, we're discussing this quite a lot internally, and we believe actually that these, I mean, just like you learn that when you walk over a street, you should, look left, you look right, you look left, that you should learn sort of the basics within cyber, because you are using these apps in school, etc. So why not having that as some kind of part in your training at school, etc. Not only just the sort of these basic things.
I agree. I mean, it's one thing not getting in a car with a stranger or accepting something from strangers, and it seems very ingrained in our DNA that we should be mindful about that. However, the part where we spend most of our time, or a lot of our time at least, is like online. We're not being taught anything, not in school, not by parents or anything. So having that sort of mindset, if not paranoid, then at least being a little bit aware, stop, think, like you said. I think that goes a long way. So I wanted to finish off by asking you a little bit, like, what do you see in the future for cyber attack? I'm not saying like necessarily tomorrow, but maybe over the course of next year or something like that. What do you see like being potentially like the next thing for cyber attacks?
I believe that there's so much money in this. As I mentioned, last year, $1 billion income to the hackers from ransomware.
So they are actually being paid.
They are being paid.
Right.
So not for everyone, but of course. But I mean, I think it's also, you come into a situation where you're basically locked out from all of your system. You cannot deliver on your promises to your customer. You become desperate.
Yeah.
To a point that you feel that you're, in partly the only solution is paying. But I think that's sort of short-sighted, and I think that we need to sort of build the resilience for these kind of situation, and making sure that we have backups of our sort of data, and making sure that we, really take cybersecurity serious, because that statistics that I mentioned earlier, that the cost related to cybercrime in 2028, almost, I think, $14 trillion cost. So I think this will just continue, and we need to be stepping up our game.
Right.
I think companies in general, and I think Sweden in particular. We've seen some of the things happening here last 6 months or so, that we are vulnerable, and our society is vulnerable.
It's not going to go away, right?
It's not going to go away. It will only accelerate. But of course, there are ways to battle it. Training is one of the solutions, but there need to happen, of course, other maybe more technical things that can help to mitigate this. But I think AI will play a crucial role here, both in sort of terms of the sort of threat side, in terms of phishing, etc., but also, I think, in terms of the defense side, that smart new ways of utilizing AI to detect threats, and so I think we'll see a lot of things moving here.
All right, so for our listeners, we're wrapping up. Where can they find you and your company?
Junglemap.com, that's where you can find us.
All right. Thank you, Gustav, for being part of the Clean Feed.
Thank you.